This piece is called You Go Girl, in drag and in pink. Outside on a hot summer night, people are milling, waiting for the show to begin. Young and old, black and white, middle-aged straight couples and clusters of gay men, attractive young people and unattractive young people. People in various degrees of cosplay. The fashion choices include pink, everything, rainbow shorts, and a certain amount of black leather. The excitement is palpable. People have been waiting for this for a very long time. The next day at a different venue, at a different show entirely, the only element missing is the black leather. I went to both events as an anthropologist, stepping into parts of American culture with which I had no prior experience. While anthropologists never want to call attention to their otherness, it is generally impossible to conceal the fact that you are other when you drop in from what might as well be outer space. When I lived in Madagascar, where I was not anthropologist but biologist, I was the focus of endless attention. Children followed me, the bravest among them racing up to touch my skin and my hair, even the shy ones pointing and shouting "Vaza" as I walked down the street. White person. It wasn't cruel, and it wasn't dangerous. They just had never seen anything like me before. They wondered what I was, as it was obvious to them that I wasn't the same as what they were. On a Saturday night in Portland, Oregon this week, I went to Keller Auditorium for the Work the World show put on by the juggernaut that is RuPaul's Drag Race. Unlike an actual anthropologist, I had intentionally come entirely unprepared. I have never seen an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race. I barely know what it is, don't really know the conceit, certainly don't know the players, and most definitely do not know the culture that has bubbled up around it. I wanted to see the show without having heard anything in advance about what other people thought, and to see it as a standalone event. The next day, I went to see Barbie, the movie. The similarities were striking. The backstory is, I love live theater, and I was going to be finding myself in Portland for a couple of days, and whenever I am going to be in a city at this point, I look for the live theater that's going to be out there. And there was really nothing this time. The only thing that I found in looking through the listings was RuPaul's Drag Race, Work the World, W-E-R-K, Work the World. And I looked at it and I clicked off of it and I looked at it again. I thought, that actually sounds like that could be research. I have no idea actually what this is. And I do suspect that the juggernaut, as I call it in the piece, that is RuPaul's Drag Race, helped bring in some of what we are experiencing in the world right now, including, as I talk about later in the piece, what seems to be an ever graying boundary between drag and trans, which of course, when drag was out there in the 60s and the 70s, we were assured it was a totally different thing. So I bought the ticket, and it was with some apprehension that I, forced myself to go. I bought the ticket. I was going to go. I went alone. And before I went, though, I thought, because I, like everyone else who is not under a cultural rock at the moment, has just been blasted with the Barbie media blitz, right? And I thought these two things might have a lot more in common than I know. So without looking into anything more than what you're just exposed to walking around in the world with regard to Barbie, I went to the two things. And what I write about here, of course, is the cultural anthropologists' sort of, participant observation, in this case, not really participant observation, but, observation of cultures not your own.
Can you answer a question for me
Yeah.
first, though? I
Yeah.
may not be the only person with it, or maybe I am.
Yeah.
As little as you knew about RuPaul's Drag Race, I
Yeah.
may know even less.
Okay.
Is it a television I've heard the term RuPaul's Drag Race.
I think it is probably correctly referred to as a reality TV show. Everything has become a spectacle. Before showtime at the Keller Auditorium, the music is intense, booming, distorted, at least this close to the stage in the shadow of massive speakers. Beams of red light sweep over the crowd, and the giant screen is digital drag dystopia on endless repeat. Finally, the show starts, a short high-energy dance number with a dozen drag queens, people wearing personas that are known by a large fraction of the audience. So that's the thing. Like, it seemed like most of the audience knew all the drag queens who showed up. So they'd been on past seasons. I think there's like 14 or 15 seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race. So they've been on past seasons. They were favorites or not, I don't even know. But, people cheered when these people came out, when the drag queens came out. They were clearly known by the audience. These queens are famous, but they're famous in the way of all reality TV stars, famous for being famous and for some exaggerated aspects of their personalities. The show is primarily a series of dance numbers, most with a single central drag queen plus 6 accessory dancers, 2 women and 4 men. The accessory dancers are excellent at what they do and they work hard. Hopefully the gig pays well. Most modern dance doesn't, I think, involve quite so much twerking and writhing and grabbing of crotches. Whenever a new act comes on stage, the audience screams in ecstasy like so many teenage girls. Some of the drag queens have moves, to be sure. A few of them are beautiful, even, at least from this distance. Asia, our host for the evening, is among them. But the audience screams especially hard for the obese drag queens. The obese drag queens have rolls of fat. And when they jiggle their fat suggestively, the audience roars its approval. When they grab their own crotches, they get more screams. When they make suggestive movements with their tongues, more screams. And one of them, improbably and impressively, does the splits. The response is nearly ear-shattering. Other than that one move, though, the obese drag queens demonstrate little in the way of skill. And yet they are adored. After intermission, 2 amateur drag queens are brought on stage from the audience. They are going to lip sync for your life. It's a competition which the audience will judge. The first queen is polished and immaculately put together with tall black boots so elaborate that Asia comments on them approvingly. He's a tall, leggy Brazilian with long, perfectly straight blonde hair. He does this drag queen flip of the hair that I sort of think I associate with drag queens, even though I'm not sure I've ever seen a drag show. He's got perfectly straight, long blonde hair, and lip syncs well to a song he didn't know was coming. He also knows how to move. The second amateur drag queen they pulled up on stage does not have the moves and mostly fails to lip sync at all while jiggling his bits. He is also obese. And what he has, in addition to his fat, is the presumption that people will love him. He is right. They do. The audience overwhelmingly gives him the win. Objectively, he wasn't nearly as good as the first guy, but that presumes that I understand what the game is. Clearly, I do not. The obese amateur drag queen does know the game, though, and plays it well. Or rather, he works it. He does it so well that I know his name, Charisma with a K, but do not know the name of the more skillful queen who lost. The game, I guess, is about being something so loud and so brash that others will fall all over themselves to demonstrate their adoration of you. Loudness and brashness and simply not being as you're expected to be is now sufficient to earn adulation, if you choose to claim that ground. It's a way of telling the system off, without having to have any clarity about what the system is, or why you're angry at it in the first place. Charisma with a K earns a solid "you go girl" vibe from the audience. "You go girl" would seem to be a statement of female empowerment. I'm not convinced. It seems to me at best to be a celebration of that which is immutable, those things that you did not earn and did nothing to change. At worst, it's a celebration of poor choices and unfortunate outcomes. So, I don't know how you're looking at me.
It's a thoroughly disturbing picture that you paint. Mm-hmm. And especially, I mean, I know that this is the subject of your essay, but it is especially disturbing in light of the preposterous conversation, the sophistry surrounding transness, and even more so having this take place in Portland, where everyone, at least overtly, is so thoroughly believing of these incredible claims. So anyway,
the newly elected governor of Portland, no, the newly elected governor of Oregon, Tina Kotek, I have seen, has just, I don't know if she has proposed or has managed to push through, I sincerely hope not, that children as young as 15 should be allowed to get trans-affirming health care without consent or knowledge of their parents. So Tina Kotek never would have been elected without Portland. The rest of the state doesn't buy into this crap. Eugene, I guess, but Oregon is a big western state with one massive city, and it's not even that massive, but one big city, and the ethos, the statewide ethos, is becoming the Portland ethos, and that fits very well with what seems to be happening in the audience at this Work the World show, a complete abandonment of reality, I guess, and the idea, and that wasn't the most surprising thing I saw. I'll get to that, but the idea that drag, which I've never liked the idea of, like never, that even though I love David Bowie. Right? And I'm remembering the movie Victor Victoria, must be from the early 80s, with Julie Andrews playing a down on her luck act performer of some sort who I think the conceit of the film is she goes in drag to perform, but then then she furthermore puts on a female.
She plays a man playing a woman.
Right. And it reveals this, this onionness of human identity and personality and what your eye thinks and what your brain thinks and what you can, how, to what degree does it matter? But there's never a confusion there. And Bowie was never confused
Right. In
about,
fact,
what the character actually is.
these were conscious attempts to play on gender roles, take that
Right.
term to be
Right.
prior to the current battle over them. These were conscious. Nobody was trying to fool anybody. And it's interesting, the mind is strange in this regard. So I don't know what percentage of straight men I speak for here. I'll speak for myself, but I would bet that this is largely resonant. A woman wearing a man's shirt can be very sexy. A woman wearing a mustache, horrifying, right? It's like, why does the mind distinguish between these two things? And so anyway, an intelligent person like David Bowie playing on these tropes is revealing things about your own construction. They're things worth knowing.
He never thought he actually was Ziggy Stardust.
Right.
It was a character.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So throughout history and prehistory, presumably, there will be intentional playing on tropes, which is very different than attempts to mislead. And of course, all of cinema, all of fiction,
right,
is in some sense people, you walk in there with a suspension of disbelief and you accept that these characters are who they say they are.
Yeah. And I guess in some ways, your suspension of disbelief requires, like, you can't be asked to continually suspend your disbelief over and over and over and over again on multiple different topics, right? A fictional world that you want to immerse yourself in, that the filmmaker or the writer is asking you to immerse yourself in, is welcoming you into, will only work if you suspend your disbelief sort of once. It could be at a global level. It couldn't be about everything, right? But once. Your brain can't continually be being called, repeatedly called to, like, wait, what was that? What's going on? What's going on?
You can't be asked to increase the level of suspension repeatedly without breaking the illusion.
And, I talk later in this film about, later in this piece, about a film from 1974, a surrealist film from Buñuel called The Phantom of Liberty. And maybe I'll end up reading this whole thing, but in which, a lot of European New Wave cinema in the 60s, 70s was explicitly playing with social norms. And great, but I think many of the thinkers in that era, and of course this is the same era that we get a lot of the originators of actual postmodernism, made the mistake of imagining that if some social norms are both culturally created and past their sell-by date, then all social norms must be culturally created and past their sell-by date. And that's not true. That is a false conclusion, and it may be fundamental to the whole error of postmodernism. Like, you can be right. Like, you can be right about some of these critiques, that language can help create social norms, and that the panopticon that we're living in is not good for most of us, right? But that doesn't mean that your insight applies universally to everything that humans have ever done. And that's the world we're now living in. So obese drag queens that don't appear to have any skill by the, and I admit freely, like, I don't know what the game is. I don't know, what they think they are doing, but to have two amateur queens get up on stage and to have one of them look to me like I remember drag queens looking, and he looks compelling, and to have the audience overwhelmingly through their votes with cheers at the end vote for the guy who couldn't even lip sync, and that was what the game was said it was to be about. What is it then? What is it that we are being asked to buy into? The whole thing, and again I say this later in the piece, the whole thing feels like a dare. Like, call me out on this. Call me out. And the fact is, most of us who aren't into this aren't looking at all. And then a lot of us who are looking at it are going like, wait, what did I miss? Like, no. You know what? Just like when I had students who didn't have much background in science, and I would insist that they were reading the primary literature, right? But I didn't give them textbooks. You're going to be reading the primary literature. Well, I can't assess that. You're going to learn how to. And they come to me and say, oh, I don't understand it. And sometimes they didn't understand it because they didn't have the background. Very often they didn't understand it because it was written terribly and was written to confuse. Because a lot of the scientific literature, like a lot of the technical literature everywhere, is written by someone who has something to hide, doesn't really know what they're talking about, and doesn't really want to be called out on anything that is in what they are putting out there. And so just, giving students appropriate, not inappropriate, but appropriate confidence to say, actually, this conclusion here does not follow from the evidence that you have laid out. And that's on you, not me. That's a you problem, not a me problem. This scientific paper is not good. Like, I feel like that's the framing with which we should all be looking at things like, why did the obese drag queen win? Now, the stakes seem like they're lower here, but maybe not, because I feel like everywhere we're going now in society, we're being told, oh, yeah, A looks to you like it's better than B in every regard, but B is winning. We're like, what? Why?
So
you've given me no evidence.
I mean, I think you're calling attention to exactly the right question, and it doesn't really matter that this is low stakes. In fact, it could be zero stakes, because the real point is that it is diagnosing the audience. That's the really important thing, okay?
Yeah.
And what I wrote down here is the game more broadly than RuPaul's Drag Race is suspend your disbelief or else. That's what we are being told.
But not just suspend your disbelief or else. Suspend your disbelief, and now another thing, and another thing, and another thing. It's like the progressive stack meets suspend your disbelief, and now it's now you got to be disabled or else we don't love you. Now you got to now you got to be obese or we don't love you. Now whatever it is.
But right? I think this proves the point, because when you go to a movie, right, and when they say we are living in a magical realm, and people cast spells, and those spells have consequences for reasons we're not going to explain. That's the level at which you suspend your disbelief. And then they up the level of disbelief to something, they invent a character to explain some error that they've made earlier in the story, right? And the point is, well, now I have fallen out of the belief that I create the disbelief state which I had suspended.
Yes.
And you've broken the illusion, you've broken character in the middle of the thing, and I'm no longer on board, so I don't know what it costs to go to a movie these days, but you've wasted my money.
Yeah, $12-13.
Suspend your disbelief or else is about something else. It's about safety, right? You're going to suspend your disbelief. This is a threat. The threat is, if you cannot suspend your disbelief about men turning into women, you're a problem, and you're going to end up on the wrong end of this mob, right? So how do you explain an audience?
And it's a bunch of men and women face who are going to come at you.
Right. So how do you explain a Portland audience signing up to go see this thing and then voting for a much less compelling version to win a competition that is ostensibly about being more compelling? What this is an opportunity to virtue signal. I'm better at suspending my disbelief than you are. And so the point is, it is the threat that they feel that is causing them to embrace the least compelling version, to prove, even in that case, oh, that looks like a woman to me.
But I mean, it's also true that, and I did not talk in this piece about what I saw in the audience. There's a lot that I saw and I thought, and that did not end up here. But as you might imagine, the crowd had some beautiful and compelling people in it, including, for instance, some guys who looked like they walked out of the Castro in the 1980s, like some just fabulous gay guys, really, really built, wearing like black leather, and like could have been the Village People, right? But it also had the 2010s, 2020s version of the woke brigade, the so-called queer community, if you will, which by and large, these people do not look healthy, right? It's, people are, very doughy, very pale, lots of artificial color on their skin and their hair and such, and some elaborate costuming, which, okay, but often not, just kind of dingy clothes and doughy both affect and physique. And at some level, I think that people have become convinced that to aspire is somehow shaming those who haven't done better. And so by voting for the obviously less compelling, less skillful, and less attractive person, they are both affirming who they are and not, fat shaming, beauty shaming, all of these things, which is actually just code for if you are fit and healthy and look good, you don't get to talk about it because I'm in charge now. And I don't have health. I don't have beauty. I don't, apparently, often don't have much going on at all, but I've declared that I'm in charge, and somehow a lot of people are buying into it.
Well, there's a generalized theme across multiple things that we have talked about in the last couple of years. You've got a population that is, by whatever mechanism, actually being sabotaged in its attempt to do what people used to do automatically. Try to look good, try to be strong, to have virtuous characteristics, to be capable, to achieve things in the marketplace. Now, you can make all kinds of critiques about that system and how well it works, how fair it actually is, what you do about the fact that people are often hobbled through no fault of their own. But when you have a large fraction of the population that is, let's say, obese because of factors that they've never been able to identify, impurities in their food, jobs that cause them to be sedentary, light regimes that cause them to misunderstand what part of the year they're in. Who knows what the factors that contribute to such a thing might be? But when you have people who know that there is no switch they can flip, there's nothing they can do, they are just simply in this state, then of course an attack on the idea of better and worse sounds appealing. Wouldn't it be great if I just didn't feel awful, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not either or. So, you and I, to the chagrin of some, mostly right of center people, correctly point out how much of the obesity epidemic is actually about conditions and parameters that happen to people when they are children and don't have any choice in the matter, and that it is very, very hard to fully undo those things. Maybe impossible to fully undo those things. However, you can begin making different choices now, and everyone should begin making different choices now if they are unhealthy.
Oh, of course, I'm not arguing against that. But the problem is that pattern that people should adopt is one that requires an extreme taste for delayed gratification, right? Mm-hmm. That there's no set of choices you can make today that are going to have you feeling substantially different by this evening, right? So the point is, you're talking about changing patterns of behavior that over the course of years of dedication will result in improvement, and who knows how much. Some people achieve great things in this way, but it's really, really difficult. And so all I'm saying is that there's a siren song on the rocks, and the siren song says that, you know what? The whole set of notions that we grew up with, that some people are more beautiful than others, that some people achieve more because they're more capable than others, all of that was nonsense. It was an excuse. And the problem is that that's not total bullshit, right? There's an awful lot of rent seeking that makes people rich. Did those people contribute more? Is that why they're rich? No. Some of them, not at all.
Right.
Some of them are rich and...
Some of them are explicitly and only parasitic.
Right. Many of them are only parasitic. Some of them actually did something that accounts for 15% of their extraordinary wealth, and the rest of it was the result of rent seeking. That's not uncommon. Yeah. So the point is, for those who are not in a position to do anything to control their trajectory, they're basically planktonic. They're drifting through the economy. They're drifting through their physiological...
Planktonic rent seekers.
Well, they're platonic. They're not even in a position to seek rent. But the point is, for the person who is helpless because they just didn't, they weren't born into circumstances where they had the resources to do it, and they've been, bombarded with chemicals that are misinforming them, and school didn't help, and all of this stuff. The idea that maybe it was all bullshit all along. There's an awful lot of bullshit. Maybe it's just all bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? That is very appealing.